Just by being here, you're joining us in supporting the incredible work of our Federation. So thank you. To make sure you have the best view, be sure you're in speaker view. And if you've decided to join us tonight alongside a friend, rename yourselves so we know that everyone is here. This year has challenged and impacted us all in many different ways. So before we get started with the flowers, my co-chair Alex and I are going to spend a few minutes talking about why we're here. And then after the flowers, we're all going to spend another few minutes in breakouts to get to mingle a little bit.
Thanks, Tracy. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex, and I'm very excited to be co-chairing this event. Planning this has been a lot of fun, and I'm very excited to get started. But in addition to the flowers delivered by Alice's table, you should have received a special gift from both Tracy and myself. As Mother's Day approaches, we could all use a little moment to stop, relax, and treat yourself. You deserve it. Finally, while you are making your arrangements, think about what superpower you wish you had or seemed to acquire during COVID as a mom or mom-to-be. In each of your rooms, there will be a facilitator, but think about it as you're working.
I'm Tracy Hennis and live in Westfield with my husband, Mark, and 2 kids, Emily, who is 6, and Drew, who is 3. Like many of you, my family attends local Jewish preschools, camps, and temple. I've always noticed the Jewish Federation signs outside of these buildings, but never really made the connection as to what this means for me or what Federation actually does within the community. Last year, I experienced directly how our Federation supports us and our families. I currently sit on the board and preschool committee at Temple Emmanuel. And last summer, I learned that our Temple preschool will be a recipient of emergency funding directly from Federation. The funding addressed challenges around reopening the preschools, such as reduced class sizes and all the additional cleaning supplies, protective equipment, and other items needed to keep our children and teachers safe in a pandemic. I previously thought of Federation as helping the elderly and those in need. I had never imagined that I would be the beneficiary of this type of support, but our institutions needed to open, and ultimately, our children were able to return to their Jewish preschools and schools this past fall, and even to camp last summer because of this emergency assistance. How did this emergency assistance come to be? More than 10,000 Greater Metro West supporters helped Federation raise over $25 million last year. This support enables the incredible organization to both assist our community annually and to respond when crisis hits. This is what Federation does. My interest was piqued. I wanted to know more about the work that Federation makes possible. This past winter, I participated in a young leadership development program called Berinsky. Along with 15 other community members, some of whom are here this evening, we spent 6 weeks learning about the incredible impact that Federation makes both in our local Jewish community and abroad. I learned that Federation's impact on our children exists well beyond the direct financial support I witnessed. The work brings together all of the Greater Metro West preschools for things like teacher training and best practice sharing, and assists with the implementation and review of the security protocols for all 85 Jewish institutions in our community. And of course, provides our preschools and many of us with PJ library books. I came to know and deeply appreciate that we're all directly impacted by Federation's work without even necessarily knowing it. It is incredible how many people can be impacted by one organization. And this video is going to show us a little more about how.
Alex, you just unmute.
Sorry. What I was saying was that was an awesome video. Thank you. And for those of you, again, who don't know me, I want to introduce myself. My name is Alex Feinstein, and I live in Short Hills with my husband, Jeff, and our 2 children, Gemma, who's 4, Casey, who's 2, and our 7-year-old dog, Hank. When my husband and I met, we were living in the city and we became involved with UJA in New York. My family, as well as Jeff's family, are longtime Federation supporters. And when we moved out here about 2 years ago, I knew to reach out to Federation in our new community to connect and get involved. As I started to get connected and meet people, I realized that Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West has so much to offer and such a massive presence all around us. My parents moved closer to us here in Short Hills because my dad was sick with dementia and his illness was sadly progressing. I really wanted to be able to be there to help them. A few weeks after their move, my dad fell and broke his hip. After a stay at a rehabilitation facility, he was unable to go home, and it was recommended he spend a few weeks at Daughters of Israel in West Orange. I visited my dad almost every day. I had lovely meals with him in the dining hall, and I often took Gemma, my daughter, there to visit, where we would sit outside in the garden and she would do little dances for him. I soon learned that Daughters is a beneficiary agency of our federation. Daughters of Israel is a traditional nursing home facility for Jews and non-Jews alike to have a place that provides a continuum of health-related and social services. Once my dad returned home, it was recommended that we reach out to the JCC of Metro West in West Orange, specifically the Jonathan and Nancy Littman Memory Center through the Senior Center at the JCC. The Littman Memory Center's goal is to provide individual and group activities that encourage socialization, education, and recreation for those suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia, as well as provide relief for their caregivers. It is a safe place where my dad could experience a greater sense of purpose and feel part of a community. My dad went there 3 times a week up until COVID, where they then made a tremendous effort to have classes on Zoom for him and the other participants. This program was a wonderful outlet for my dad, and I was so grateful that this service existed in our community. I soon learned that the Littman Memory Center is also an agency of Federation. During the same time, my daughter Gemma was happily enjoying our synagogue preschool, Temple B'nai Jeshurun, when the pandemic hit. And like all of you, we were suddenly at a standstill when volunteer leadership at Jewish Federation asked me to participate by sitting on an emergency granting committee. An emergency response team led by professionals and volunteers granted $250,000 to be allocated to our local early childhood centers, most at synagogues, to assist them in opening the preschools we send our children to in a safe and secure environment. Participating on this committee was incredibly meaningful, and I have a different sense of pride when I now see the Federation sign on the driveway of Gemma's synagogue's preschool every morning. From my 4-year-old daughter to my 77-year-old dad, Federation has been there for me and my family. Not only did Federation provide support for me, but Federation is there for you too, and all of those who are facing challenging times, and for those looking to connect to our vibrant Jewish community. The thing I love most about Federation is that no matter where you turn, Federation is somehow there, even in the background, helping. In a world of uncertainty, the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West is one thing I know for certain will be there for all of us. With that, we want to thank you once again for joining us tonight. We know many of you are new to Federation, and we want to welcome you. Federation is really an amazing avenue to get to know each other like-minded women who want to impact our community just like you. Tracy and I have certainly seen this firsthand, and we are so glad that many of you are here with us to take that first step. And lastly, before we move forward, if you have multiple people with you, please update your usernames so that we know who has joined us tonight. And with that being said, finally, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa from Alice's Table. Lisa, let's do this.
Alex, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. And I loved hearing the story of your group. And I feel so honored to be a part of this event this evening. I will go ahead and hop in. I know we are on a time schedule here, so I will be leading you through creating this gorgeous arrangement this evening. The things you want to have nearby before we get started, everything that came in your kit. So your flowers, hopefully you have those hydrating in some water. your vase. And then in addition to that, you'll just need a pair of scissors, garden shears, or even a sharp knife. You will need some water, but I'll give you a minute when we get to that step if you need to step away. And then it's helpful if you can have some sort of bin or bucket or just your trash can nearby as we start to discard some of the items. And then it's that time of day. So if you're ready for a cocktail or you're having a tea, grab that and have that with you as well. So a little bit about Alice's Table. We are a lifestyle events company that brings hands-on experiences with the mission of bringing people together. And like I said, I feel so honored that you've chosen us to be part of your event this evening. My name is Lisa. I'll respond to Alice as well. I usually get called both. I've been with Alice's Table for about 3 years. I actually started my career working in finance and technology, but I grew up as the daughter of a florist. My mother had her own floral design studio when I was young, so I was always her little helper. I do have 3 little helpers of my own now. I have a 7, 5, and 2-year-old, which makes me realize that I probably wasn't really helping my mom as much as I thought I was. But they're very fun memories for me of helping her in the floral shop. And I love to be able to spread this passion of mine and share it with all of you. So we'll go ahead and get started. The very first thing that you'll need this evening is your vase. Now we're gonna go ahead and fill that with room temperature water. Now, when in your kit, you should have received 2 packets of flower food. Hopefully you use the first when your flowers arrive to give them a fresh cut and get those rehydrating in water. We'll go ahead and use the second packet now. So I'll give you a couple options. That much flower food is meant for 1 quart of water. Now 1 quart is about a pitcher this size. So if you would like, you can dilute the entire package into a quart of water. If you just want to go ahead and dump it straight into your vase, that's fine too. I would recommend using about 1/3 to 1/2 of that packet for the amount of water that we'll need to fill this vase. Now, like I said, room temperature water is what we'll want to use to fill the vase. Room temperature water will help preserve the state of the blooms. So our goal once we create this gorgeous arrangement is to have it lasting as long as possible. Now you could use warmer water if you needed to encourage your blooms to open up a little bit faster. For example, if you buy roses that are nice and closed, warmer water would encourage those to open up. You do always want to avoid putting your flowers into cold water. Cold water can actually shock the flowers and decrease their vase life. So room temperature water with the flower food in it. Now the flower food, I often get asked, does the flower food really work? Should I use it? And the answer is yes, you should definitely use it. The flower food is a mixture of a sugar and a preservative. The sugar will feed the flowers, and then the preservative will help keep bacteria out and keep those lasting as long as possible. Now, I'll just quickly mention, I know we've already got the water in our vase, but I do love to keep this interactive. So if you have questions for me as we are going along, please use the chat or unmute and feel free to stop me if you have any questions along the way. I do have 2 devices going, so recording here, and if you see me looking down at all, that's where I'll just be checking on any questions from you, and that's where I can see all of you as well as we start working. Now we're ready for our first ingredient. Now, when creating an arrangement like this, I always like to start with the greenery. So the very first item that we'll be using is this green pittosporum. Now we're going to use about 3 stems of the pittosporum to start. Now it's important to green the base of our arrangement. That will give us a really beautiful green backdrop for all these blooms that we'll be adding. And then the second purpose that the greenery creates is some structure. Now you'll notice our vase is pretty short that we're using this evening, but it has a fairly large opening. It's about 4 inches wide. Now, normally when you get a large shipment of flowers like this, or you buy a large bouquet, I think what a lot of people do is they go for that tall vase that's in their top cabinet and kind of just stick everything in it, and then it ends up flopping over. So what I'm going to teach you is how to create a nice full arrangement that will create a great centerpiece that will sit nicely on your kitchen island or your kitchen table, but it won't be obtrusive or blocking or in the way of conversation. Now back to this vase. When using this, since it is a bit of a wider opening, The structure is very important because that's what's going to help us control the placement of the additional blooms that we'll be adding. So we're going to go ahead and start with the pittosporum. We're going to use about 3 stems. Now, each of these pieces, I'll be able to cut in half and use in about 2 different pieces. The goal with the height of our arrangement, we have a 4-inch tall vase. We're going to about double that in size. So we'll have about 4 inches of the stem in the water, and then we'll have another 4 to 5 inches of greenery outside the water. So I'll show you this a couple times. This is the trickiest part, I promise you. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that stem in half. So I have the lower part of the stem and then the top. I'm going to start with the lower part. And before placing in the vase, like I said, I'll need about 4 inches of the stem in the water and then another 4 to 5 inches of the greenery outside of the water. Before you place it in your vase, you'll want to make sure to remove any of the leaves that would be below the water line. So you want no leaves in your water. The reason for that is because they will start to deteriorate and create bacteria in the water, which will then spread to the other flowers and decrease their vase life. So remove any of the leaves that would be below the water line, and I'll just give it a fresh cut at a 45-degree angle. And then I'll angle that in my vase. It's going all the way across the bottom of my vase to the opposite corner. And I'm going to do that all the way around the outside of my vase. So I have my second piece of this. Now the top part, this is where I'll need to remove some of the lower lying leaves so they don't end up in the water. So I'll just gently pull those off. And then again, angle that. And I'm just crisscrossing the stems in the bottom. So I'll go ahead and keep working there. Now I do want to show you some of the pittosporum. You may have some laterals. Mine might not be quite long enough to use on their own, but if your laterals are long enough that they'll reach to the bottom of the vase, you can cut those off and use them individually. So we'll end up with about, if you're able to use each piece into about 6 pieces of individual stems of greenery from the 3 stems of pittosporum. I'll remove some of these lower lying leaves. And then, like I said, they're just crisscrossing in the bottom, almost creating a little teepee-like structure. And that's what's going to control where we place those additional blooms. Now, if you feel like your stems are falling out of your vase or flopping over, that probably means they're a little bit too long. So try trimming those down a bit and placing back in your vase. And it looks like we have Samantha raised a hand. I don't know if you're able to unmute, if you want to go ahead. I don't know if you need someone else to unmute you. Or I'll keep an eye on the chat.
We can
as
unmute.
well.
Sorry, who was it?
So much. Thank you so much. Quick question. We just wanted to know, how long are these supposed to be? Did you say 4 inches from the?
Double the thing, I told you.
I know, but just tell me again, please. Sorry.
Yes, that is a great question. I'll say it a couple different ways. So probably your overall stem is going to, before you place it in your vase, is going to be about 8 inches tall. Now, what I mean by the 4 inches is our vase is 4 inches tall. So 4 inches of the stem with no leaves on it will be in the vase. And then you'll have another 4 to 5 inches that's coming outside of the vase. Does that make sense? Like I said, the greenery is the trickiest part. Everything else after this is super easy. But this will be very important to create that nice structure for the backdrop of the blooms. Okay, so I used 3 stems. I'll hold this up for you a bit so you can see. It's not super full right now. I just have a nice green, almost like a little plant or bush on the top of my vase, going all the way around the outside. And then all the stems are crisscrossing in the vase on the bottom. How's everyone doing with that so far? Okay, good. We're on track. Now we always start with the greenery, and then the next thing that we'll do is we'll move on to our largest flower first. So we'll start with our largest flower, which will be our feature flower, and then we'll make our way to our secondary flowers and then add texture at the end. So our largest flower and our feature flower this evening are these beautiful white roses. These are so gorgeous. This is my very favorite variety of white roses. These are Tibet roses. They open really wide. So mine are already starting to open nicely. They have very symmetrical petal placement as they start to open. You'll be amazed at how open these become in the next few days. Now, how can you tell if a rose is fresh when you're picking these out at the store? Now, rather than just looking to see if it's open or not, the best way to tell is by squeezing the base of the rose, the head of the rose. So if it still feels pretty firm, that means it's nice and fresh. You want to avoid any roses that are very mushy or pretty soft to the touch. So these are starting to open up nicely, but they're still nice and firm. Now, I mentioned if your roses that you're picking out, sometimes you tend to look at the top, but really you want to feel if it's nice and fresh. And even if they are tightly closed, I actually choose those roses, prefer those roses, because they'll open up and have their moment in my vase on my countertop versus being past that moment, having already had their moment in the grocery store. So warmer water will encourage roses to open up. You can also gently blow on the petals. You'll notice that that pushes the petals outward, and then the warm air will encourage it to start the opening process as well. Now, to prepare the rose, there's a couple things that we'll do. We will remove all leaves on the stem. Again, we don't want any leaves in our water to create or spread any bacteria. So be mindful of any thorns, but just go ahead and pull all of the leaves off of your rose. Now, you can also remove one or two of the outer petals on your rose. Those are considered the guard petals, and that will also help your rose open up to its full potential. So you can just gently pluck any of those outer, one or two of those outer petals off. I also like to take a look if there's any little tears or browning, just kind of clean up the head of the rose before you place it in your arrangement. Now, when cutting our roses, it's important to work one at a time. Once we cut roses, they will immediately start to scab over. And what that means is just the bottom of the stem will start to close up. And it's a protection mechanism to keep that bacteria out. However, the rose won't be able to properly hydrate. So it's important to be decisive. And once you've cut your flower, make sure that it goes right into the water. Now, no big deal if you set it down because you need a refill on your wine or a little one needs help with their snack. No big deal. Just give it another fresh little trim before you place it in water. And that might be, you may have heard before that you should cut your flowers underwater. That's the thought process behind it. I don't think that's 100% necessary, just important to cut it and then be direct with placing it into the water. So we'll cut it at a 45-degree angle to provide some additional surface area for the flower to drink the water. And then in terms of height on the roses, we're going to keep these are a feature flower. We're going to keep these fairly close to the base of the arrangement. I always think it's helpful to hold it up to the base to see. So we'll have about 4 inches of the stem in the base, and then we'll have another inch or so that's outside of the base. So in total, our stem is going to be about 5 to 6 inches when we cut it. So I'll cut it at a 45-degree angle. And then this pittosporum will help us choose the placement, will help keep our rose where we put it. I'm going to angle 2 more to the outside and try to keep 1 right in the middle of my arrangement. Now, while you're working on those, I want to show you a fun little trick that florists often use when arranging with roses. This will be a fun little trick that you can wow your friends and guests in the future. And that's called reflexing. So to reflex a rose, it's best done with roses that are a little more open like these. They may be a few days older. So maybe more like 3 or 4 days they've been in your vase, or even the discounted roses at the grocery store that have been there for a few days. And to reflex it, what you do is you just take the outermost petal and you start at the base and you just flip it inside out. So you work your way from the base out and you just start working your way all the way around. Now, if your roses are super fresh or closed tightly, you'll have a bit of a difficult time doing this, or you might end up tearing some of the petals. So if yours is fighting you back a little bit, it's not worth damaging the rose. So just place it in your arrangement and you can come back and try this again in a couple days. Now, what this does is it transforms the look of a flower to look a little more like a garden rose. And when creating an arrangement like this, I like to do this maybe with 1 of the roses, maybe not all of them, but it will give me a little focal point in an arrangement. I also like to do this when I do see those discounted roses. You might see $5 or $6 for a dozen roses. Like I said, it means they're a little bit older, but it's fun to grab that dozen and do this with all of them. And it really creates a statement. So I'll hold that one up and show you what that looks like. And you can see the difference, just what that made in reflexing this rose versus normal. So it really kind of makes a statement as a wow factor. So I'll use that one as a focal point. This is the one I'll put right in the middle. I'll cut that stem slightly longer just to make sure it stands up and stands out. Anyone have any luck with the reflexing? I see a few. Ooh, Alex, gorgeous. Good work. Okay. Well, we have our feature flower in. Now we're going to move on to one of our secondary flowers. So tonight for our secondary flower, we'll be using these lavender pom-poms. Now these are actually chrysanthemums. These are part of the chrysanthemum family. There's over 40 different species and thousands of varieties of chrysanthemums. There's two distinct types. There's disc bud mums and then there's spray mums. Now the disc buds are just one flower on a single stem, so only one bloom, versus the sprays, which have many blooms per stem. We'll be using 3 of these stems this evening, and you can see how amazing these are. Just 3 stems, you get a great bang for your buck on these, quite a few blooms that will help fill in some of the open space in here. Now, what's interesting about mums is that they're, even though there's the disc buds and the sprays, they're all cultivated the same way. They all start grown like this with multiple sprays or multiple flowers coming off the main stem. What the growers do is they actually pinch each little individual bud off so that all the energy goes into the main flower on the stem, creating one larger bloom. So that's something like a spider mom or a football mom, if you've seen those before at your local florist or at the grocery store. Now with the sprays, we're going to use these in a couple different ways. We're going to mostly use these to be filling in some of the open space in our arrangement. We have our feature flowers, and these will start to take up some of that visual space. Now to prepare, we will remove all of the leaves along the stem, again, to keep these out of the water. And then I'm also going to remove some of these really small little buds that I have working my way up the stem. You're not going to see those in the arrangement, and it will be better just to keep those out of the water to keep the bacteria out. Now, as you get closer to the top of the stem, you may have some individual laterals that are on the longer side. And if they're long enough that they can reach the water line, you can use some of those on their own. So those are a little bit short. Let me find a better example. Yeah, here's a good one here. So some of this laterals on this one are a little bit longer where they would reach the water on their own. So I can also cut those off and use those throughout the arrangement. So what I like to do is I'll take a couple of those longer laterals off. If you have, maybe 3 of them. And I can create a little cluster of those buds. They're shorter in the stem. So like I said, I want to make sure that they reach into the water line. And I'll use those smaller little clusters on the side of my arrangement. So I'm going to tuck these right in around the side. And then the clusters that are near the top of the stem, those wouldn't be long enough to use on their own. So I'll keep this full cluster together. And then I'll place this throughout around my roses. So to give you a sense on height, our stems are going to get a little bit longer as we add each flower, as we continue to add volume to the arrangement. So the total height of this will probably be about 8 to 10 inches, again, about this, a little bit longer than the size of my hand. So I want the tops of these mums to be about at the same height as my roses in the arrangement. You can always go shorter, so no big deal if it's a little long and then you need to trim it down. Now I said we're going to use about 3 stems of these. You should have some extras. We're just looking to fill in a decent amount of the visual space between the pittosporum and the roses. Now, I know that Alex said that a few others would love to share their story as well of being part of the group. So I was just going to check in here and see if anyone, while we're working with these moms, would like to share a little with the group as well.
I see we have
Yeah.
somebody in the chat, Britt Fisher. Do you want to go ahead and we'll spotlight you?
Sure.
You're on.
All right. Thanks. Hi, guys. Everyone can hear me okay? Okay. Hey, I'm Britt Fisher. I wanted to speak today about a beneficiary of Federation called Jesby House. Many of you may already know my sister-in-law, Susie Fisher, because she works at TBJ. Susie's been a client of Jesby for many years, and I've seen firsthand how integral Jesby has been in allowing her to thrive in spite of the many hurdles she's had to overcome in her life. Jesby clients like Susie have found their home away from home, and they're truly lucky to have this kind of program in their lives. Jesby is an organization that enables adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities the opportunity to lead fulfilling and productive lives. Jesby provides a range of services and support systems to over 150 adults in our community. Some of the services offered are housing, jobs, and fun activities for clients to enjoy. Most importantly, Jesby affords these wonderful adults an opportunity to build an inclusive community which fosters a feeling of independence and belonging. Jesby has made such an impact on my family's life, and it's amazing to know that Federation is helping Jesby keep Jesby House strong, especially during these difficult times. It's so great to see so many new faces here learning about this work that somehow touches all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Britt. That was awesome.
Thank you for sharing. Now I have placed all of the lavender pom-poms in here. So I'll just give you a look at what that looks like. Like I said, the tops of the flowers are just right at the tops of the roses. And again, so much bang for your buck with those. It started to fill in a lot of that visual space for me. So I still do have some gaps because we still have a few ingredients to go to add to our arrangement. How is everyone doing? Any questions for me? They're looking amazing so far from what I can see. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to our next flower. We are going to be adding 2 stems of these white spray roses. So we started with white roses, and now we're also going to be adding these spray roses. These are sometimes called sweetheart roses at your local florist. I love adding spray roses with regular roses because they're a similar shape and similar feel, but it gives a little bit of variance because of the size. You also get, these are also great because they give you flexibility in the design because they also have laterals like the spray chrysanthemums that we used. Now we will again remove all of the leaves on the stem here. So I'll go ahead and remove those. And you can evaluate your stem. If your laterals are a little bit longer and could reach the water line on their own, you could do the same, just like we did with the daisy pom-poms. And you could use some of those along the side. Mine are a little bit shorter, so I will keep the entire cluster of the spray roses together. And I'll spread those 2 stems throughout. I have a couple little holes that I need to add, and then I'll also use these to balance the white. So I have my white roses. I have quite a bit of the lavender now. So I'll use this white to start balancing out those roses. Again, cutting at a 45-degree angle. I'm starting to fill in. Now, spray roses, they are a little bit particular about their settings. They do not like direct sunlight or heat. So keep that in mind when you decide where to place your arrangement. Keep it away from drafts, or don't put it directly right on a windowsill where it would get direct sunlight. These also require a lot of water. So you're going to notice this in this arrangement, the water line is going to go down very fast. So it's super important to check the water in your arrangement. I would say at least twice a day, right at the beginning of its vase life. As it gets a little bit older, maybe about once a day. And make sure that you keep it full with fresh, clean water. These spray roses can take up to 12 hours to fully hydrate. So you've probably noticed that since you've put yours in water, they're starting to open up very nicely. And so question about the roses and the placement of the roses. So I just tried to evenly place the roses throughout and then fill the purple in the middle. So there's a little purple between the white. So you can see that I have some breaks in the color between the whites and the purple here. So you don't necessarily have to have them like inside and outside. What I would do is if you have shorter laterals that you did cut off of the daisy pom-poms, those you would want to put on the outside of your vase just to make sure that that stem is reaching to the water line. As soon as the stem ends up out of the water line for a bit, your flower won't last very long and it will be difficult to rehydrate it for a second time. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so we started with greenery. We added our primary and our secondary flower. And now we're going to start to move on to add some textural items. Now, texture is super important. That's what takes your arrangement from being sort of basic to a bit more elevated and looking more on the professional side. So this looks amazing already, but adding some texture will really elevate the overall arrangement. Now we're going to be using 3 stems of this status. Status is a great item for texture. This is also known as the everlasting flower because it dries very nicely. So this will be super long lasting in your vase. Now, what's great about this, we have just these little fun little pops of purple, and you'll notice that this has a unique leaf that goes all the way up the stem. Now we're going to use this to just spread throughout and add a little bit of additional color and texture to our arrangement. So I'll show you again with the laterals how this one is a little bit longer. I'll be able to cut that off and use on its own. And I'll just start to spread this throughout. Now, if you do have a cluster of those spray roses or daisy pom-poms all together, you can filter the status right into the middle of one of those clusters. So you have a bit of this deeper purple peeking right out through those.
Hey, Lisa, we have a question in the chat.
Yes. Yeah, so do the roses go inside and the purple on the outside? How should they be placed? So not necessarily just on the inside or outside of the arrangement. We place the roses first, and then we're trying to disperse the purple throughout, both on the sides and in the middle. So there's a little bit of break in the color between the roses. Let me know if that answers your question. So this is also considered an herb, which is called sea lavender. And it just adds a really fun little pop of color. This is something that's pretty commonly found. You would see this at Trader Joe's or maybe at the grocery store if you wanted to add a bit of this to the next bunch of roses that you buy at the store. Now, all of your lucky husbands are going to be off the hook for Mother's Day this year, since you all have beautiful flowers at home now. Or maybe you shouldn't tell them that and just make sure that you get double duty on the flowers. And when they do bring you a bouquet, you're going to know exactly how to arrange them to make them look beautiful. How are you doing, Liz? How's it going?
Oh, good.
I can't wait to see all of these at the end. Okay, so three stems of that goes quite a long way. Again, with all of those different laterals, it gives you a nice amount to spread throughout. So at this point, we should have most of our gaps and our holes filled in. We shouldn't have any large openings. It's more just balancing the colors and adding little pops of color throughout.
Lisa,
Yes.
while we're throwing in the pops of color, should we ask Lauren to speak? I think Lauren wanted to.
That would be great. Yes.
Awesome.
I did. Thank you, Alex. Hi, I think you know most of you. I'm Lauren Hausman, and I wanted to quickly share my kind of Federation story and connection and how it's really actually been growing a lot over the past few months. But before I talk about the present, I kind of want to talk about a little bit how it started. My parents took their first trip to Israel with Federation when my mom was only almost exactly my age now. And she just fell in love. She planted the seed there that eventually would grow into these deep seated roots into Federation and Jewish life in Israel. And it has been such an integral part of her life. She actually became president of the Philadelphia chapter of the Federation several years ago. And during her time leading the Philadelphia Federation, I saw her fundraise and plan events and attend events and get involved. And I learned so much about the organization. She often took me to these events and always every year took me to Mitzvah Day. And I got to hands-on, firsthand witness the impact Federation has directly on people's lives and the community in which I grew up in. So it was always a part of me. And then I moved to the city after college. And I knew I wanted to be involved, but I felt honestly like overwhelmed. I felt like I was constantly getting emails. I didn't really know where to go. And it wasn't until we moved to New Jersey, similar to Alex a few years ago, that I started to develop my own roots and seeds into our local Metro West Federation. And it was actually over quarantine, I was invited to do this Berinsky class, which Tracy spoke about. And I didn't really know what it was, but I was like, we're in quarantine, it'll be a break from homeschool and all of that. So sure, why not? Little did I know I was entering this 6-week intensive program where you learn all about Federation. It was awesome. You learn about it locally in Metro West, nationally, and even internationally, and all of the amazing organizations like the early education centers, like the rehab center Alex mentioned, like the Jesby House, that Federation supports, and the thousands of lives that it touches, both locally and internationally. And it just struck the chord with me. And so really like my Federation relationship, if you will, is just beginning. And I've just planted those seeds. And I'm so excited now to be involved and to do things like today and learning that like every little donation, every little event like actually does make a difference in these people's lives, either in our community or overseas. And I'm just so excited that this is just the beginning of this trip.
Thanks, Laura. That was
Thank
awesome.
you so much, Lauren.
Thank you. That was so great. Now, hopefully everyone added the rest of their status. So now I'll hold this up and just give you a little look. It's looking nice and full. We have a great arrangement shaping up. And we have one final piece of a little bit of texture and one additional little pop that we'll be adding. And that is the white aster. Now, I had just one stem that we were going to add to this, but I'll give you a couple options. Sometimes I like adding just one stem of something a little bit unexpected or different to give a focal point or a feature. And I have my reflex rose here that looks gorgeous. So I'm just gonna use one stem of the aster slightly on the opposite side of my arrangement to give it a little height and just a little visual interest in there. Now, another option, you do have a few more stems of that. So if you feel that your arrangement still needs a little bit more, you could also pepper those 3 stems throughout. Now, if you're working with the flowers, it is nice to always use an odd number. You've probably heard that in design before. It's ideal to use an odd number for your groupings or pairings. So definitely if you're adding something with a little bit of height, I would stick to that rule and stick to an odd number of stems here. So I'll remove some of the lower lying little flowers and leaves on this stem. And I'm gonna leave this a little bit taller. And so like I said, you can always hold it up to the arrangement. I wanna see these delicate little flowers peeking out of the top of my arrangement. So it's always nice to add a little height at the end with some of your textural items. It doesn't have to be right in the middle. It could be a bit off to the side. And then if you'd like I said, you have a few additional stems, so you could pepper those throughout as well. And if you want to do that, you could go a little bit lower with the stem. So either add some height with it or use it for your last additional textural item. Okay, so once we have that in there, we'll do our final edits. We'll take a look at our arrangement, think about where you're placing it. If it's going to be on a table or countertop, give it a spin, make sure it looks nice from all angles. If you still do have any gaps or holes in your arrangement, you should have some flowers left over. So you could always pop an additional rose in or fill in with some more of your daisy pom-poms if needed. And if you feel, if all the balance and everything else looks good, you could always adjust the heights if you need to at this point. Sometimes it's nice to add a little pop of greenery in the middle at the end. If there is, you could always use that as a textural item at the end as well. Now, you should have quite a bit left over, so you'll be able to practice again, use another little bud vase or something that you have around the home to place the rest of the flowers in. So before I close, I do want to give you just a few tips on caring for these flowers and keep them lasting as long as possible. Now, we talked a lot about keeping the water line full. So that is the number one thing. Every day, especially tomorrow morning, you'll be surprised how quickly you'll see this water line go down. So make sure that you fill this with fresh, clean water. Now, it's difficult to completely change out the water once we've made an arrangement like this. So what I recommend doing is just holding it in your sink. You could even let some of the old water run out. Just use your faucet and let that fill with fresh, clean water. If you did use a pitcher like I had, you could also keep that with the flower food and use the pitcher to fill that up as the water line goes down. Now, the other point that I know I said a lot was about keeping the leaves out of the water to keep bacteria from spreading to the other flowers. Now, in addition to the leaves, that's also true with the flowers. Each flower naturally has a different base life. Some of these are going to last longer than others. So if something does die off in your arrangement, rather than waiting for everything to completely go, be proactive and pull that flower out. That will help extend the base life of the rest of the flowers. So you could always pop something else in that you pick up at the grocery store. You could rearrange these into a smaller vase or move them to bud vases, but important to keep anything out that is no longer looking great and fresh in your arrangement. Lastly, just be mindful about where you place this. Keep it away from drafts, direct sunlight, just a nice neutral temperature place in your home to keep it away from any drafts or excessive heat. And given that these came to you direct from the flower farm, they should last you definitely through this week and hopefully for a beautiful Mother's Day. Now, before we go, I know the group did want to get some photos. So I would love to see what you created. And then maybe as we all hold these up, I think Liz will grab a couple of screenshots of everyone and take a few photos.
So if you guys don't mind, just everybody kind of put your arrangement in front, and then Jill, I think you're going to grab, Jill or Helenko, do you mind grabbing some photos? So just let us know when you're done.
Keep holding. Hold on. Almost done. They look great. Hold on. More.
It's so cute.
This looks amazing. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jill.
Well, I just wanted to thank you again for having me. It's been such an honor to host this event with you. This has been such a fun group. It was great to guide you through creating this arrangement. So thank you all for having me, and I'll be on for a couple more minutes if there are any other questions for me.
That was so fun. Thank you, Lisa, so much. We're going to pop everyone into breakout sessions for the next 10 minutes. We hope that you meet someone new and have fun sharing your mommy superpower, and we will see you back here.
Bring it down.
Okay. I'm silent.
Oh no, it's fine. They're gonna edit this part. That's fine. It's so close. And they have 30 seconds, and then I'll be back.
That's so cool.
Oh,
That's a hard question.
Is everybody here? Let's see.
Give it 1 second. Takes like a minute for people to come back. You can go.
Okay, well, my last remarks are that I just wanted to say thank you again for joining us tonight. We're so grateful that you guys came onto this. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I look forward to seeing all of you in person very, very soon. And I hope this was just a little hour of fun out of our Zooming and our, I don't know, our tedious days. Thank you, everyone. And I will see you soon. And Tracy and I want to thank you. Okay, bye.